Good evening, America, and good afternoon, Australia. Welcome back to Radio Toni, and this is the next in a series of very special shows with my wonderful friend, Michelle Slay. And for those of you listening online on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Twitch, Teo from the Philippines is listening in to grab your comments, answer your questions, and forward you any links. Just a reminder that this show will be talking about powerful subjects, and I want you to reach out and talk to someone if you need to at any stage. We also have links that Payo can put in the live comments that will help you with anything that you're struggling with today. Now, my beautiful guest has just written a best-selling book, and this is the second in our series of shows having a frank, open, honest, and vulnerable conversation about sexual assault. Now, Michelle is an empowered survivor, and she knows the difference between being empowered and just surviving. She's done both. Michelle was the victim of 6 rapes and 1 sexual assault, beginning at the age of 5 years old, and has experienced the persecution and the challenges of her permanent, painful work-related injury. She's been stalked and powerless and has lost some people close to her through domestic murder. Now, Michelle helps people stop being at the mercy of their trauma and triggers, and she is an advocate for change in the sexual assault culture. And she set, from her own experienced sexual assault in 1997, set a legal precedent around sexual assault. Her best-selling book, Insight, Up Close and Personal Profile of Sexual Assault, will help communities to better identify to the trauma of sexual assault. Now, I have to mention today that currently in Australia, for our American and worldwide listeners, there has been a real rise in the women of Australia saying enough is enough. We have marched on Parliament, and at the moment we are awaiting, shall we say, an engaged response from our Prime Minister. I know for one that many of the women that I talk to are not willing to let this go this time. We need change for our daughters, granddaughters, and great-granddaughters, and this time we want to make it happen. So good afternoon, Michelle.
Hi, Toni. How are you?
I'm good. We're a little bit soggy and wet. That's the I said we're a little bit soggy and wet because, you know, Australia, drought 1 minute and flooding rain the next.
Yes.
But otherwise we're really good.
Yeah.
Listen,
Yes, sorry, you keep going.
last week we told the audience about your powerful story and what you're now working on and what you hope to achieve in the future. And this week we wanted to tackle the difficult topic of childhood sexual abuse. Now, Michelle knows firsthand how that plays out in the lives of children, and we thought that we'd start right there and talk to you about Michelle's experience, what it looks like, and how it played out in her life so that people can get a glimpse into the type of trauma that these crimes commit.
Yeah. Yeah, Toni, you know, the interesting thing is that a young boy got onto Facebook from a school here in Brisbane, and he talked about how men should, his friends, how the boys in his school, other boys, men should step up and be more respectful of women. And he asked some questions, you know, how can it be that still today this is still happening, and why is it still happening? And, you know, the answer to that is really very simple. It's not well understood. And so when we talk about sexual assault on children, it becomes quite difficult because you've got several things going on. And one of them is that children don't understand what's actually happening to them, right? So they don't have any context with which to be able to make sense of anything. So right through life, we learn things. We learn a lot from our parents, and we learn a lot from our experiences. But let's face it, stubbing our toe, or, you know, going to school and beginning to read, or a whole range of things are very different to the topic that we're talking about. And sexual assault can begin in the crib. Depending on the predator, it can begin with newborn children who will have an experience that they are not able to understand, and it will remain stored in their body. And it will come back and it will later affect them in their life. But it will also, as we spoke last week, make them more vulnerable to other predators, right? And so the thing about it is that we can very easily, you know, say to someone, or, you know, if anyone touches my kid, or if anyone touches you. But what does that actually mean to a child? We have to really think about it in terms of the children. And, you know, when I gave birth to my daughter, I was incredibly grateful for my history. And I was grateful for it because I had actually bothered to learn about it and study it and pull it apart and analyze it. And I'd found answers. And it meant that I could raise my daughter knowing that I can't stop her from being sexually assaulted, but I can give her language, forms of communication and dialogue to be able to tell me if something happens, but also I can educate her about the fact that these people exist. And the key to it is really doing that without bringing emotion into it, because when we bring emotion into something, we're determining whether it's good or bad. And we don't want children learning something that it's bad, so when it happens to them, they're bad. We want them to understand that this is not about them. This is about somebody else who's got a problem, and it will make us feel bad inside. However, we're not bad, right? So it's really important when you think about children and sexual assault to realize that it's right from the beginning when they're born, and they pick up on what we think and we say and we do. So whatever we think and we believe, they're going to as well. So we need to really ask ourselves, with the statistics that we have, and Toni, you've got some here, that, you know, it's actually really tragic that you've pulled up. I'm just going to put my glasses on and just review this, because I think it's really very sad when you think about it. 1 billion children aged 2 to 17 have experienced either physical, sexual, or emotional violence or neglect in the past. That's too many children. So whatever we're doing right now, it's not right and it's not enough, right? So that's a lot. That's terrible. So 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 13 boys in the US. That's terrible. Here in Australia, it's something like 1 in 5 girls and 1 in 15 boys. The statistics vary depending on which site you're on. However, it's a problem. And in my book, I go into you know, to this because we've got a different name for people who rape children to what we have for other people. And so we call them sexual this or that or the other, but a lot of the time we call them sexual perpetrators. Now, a perpetrator suggests somebody who's done something wrong. What we need to understand is that these people hunt. They are predators. We need to start, and I call them sexual predators for a very particular reason. And so you have to think to yourself, this person is hunting a vulnerable child. That vulnerability can equate to something whereby they have access. That vulnerability can relate to something whereby, whereby they, you know, are sort of alone somewhere in a playground and the parents are distracted. That vulnerability can be a whole range of things, right? So also at the same time, children are getting exposed sometimes to domestic violence and domestic rape in the home, or physical, verbal. They're getting exposed to these things. And, you know, you get kids who will then be fragile or vulnerable because they retract into themselves because they're trying to make sense of what's going on in the home. They're a predator's dream. You know, you've got to think about, when you think about protecting your child or educating your child, you need to look at it from the other side. Who's the person that's hunting your child? That's really hard to swallow, right? Now, I know who was hunting my children. And even then, one kind of slipped in. He never got near my kids because of the things that I put into place. He never got access to them on that level. But they are there, and they're looking for your children. They're looking for my children. They're looking for everyone's children. And they could be the person you're married to. They could be the person that was your father who never touched you. They could be your uncle that never touched you. They could be your husband's mother, father, brother, sister, or relative, right? They are anywhere and everywhere. So that's a really big pull to start trying to sift out, well, how do we manage something like that, right? That's huge. And the simple answer is that we need to be more aware of what a sexual predator actually is. So I talked last week very openly, and I talk about it in my book, about the fact that the person who the first memory I have of being sexually assaulted at the age of 5 was from an extended relative and came into my world, not regularly every week, but reasonably often. And in the book, I do talk about how one of my other cousins, you know, who was being ushered to go outside because he was out there looking after the kids, go and play. And when she looked out the same window as her mother, she saw something that her mother didn't see. She didn't see a grown man with a child on his knee, tickling him and having his hands on his legs and having his hands different places. But my cousin did. She saw something very different to her mother, right? Because would you send your child outside if you'd seen what my cousin had seen? No. So she hid under the sofa for the most of the day to stay away because she just felt that, oh my goodness, you know, what is that? And when I began to write this book, I was contacted by a different family member, and they were telling me that somebody else who he had assaulted many, many years later, and who actually told someone quite accidentally about him, and he was taken to court, and that there was some sort of scrapbook being made. And so I sort of reached out to a few people within the family to see if I could get a copy of the scrapbook. And, you know, I spoke to so many people, and you know what they say? You know, I can't believe he did that. You know, I still can't, because I loved him so much. And I've spoken to family members who have said to me, you know what? I loved that man. I worshiped the ground that he walked on, and he did it to me. And he said, and she said, because he crossed gender, that they just couldn't, they knew that he'd done it to them, but they couldn't make sense of it because they loved him so much. And so they are extremely loved people. They are extremely charismatic. You know, this is something that they have to be to get away with what they do. And so this is what they are. And so for a parent to go up against their family, to say this person that everybody loves is doing these things, that's really hard, even for them to figure out that that's happening. So we're not always looking out or on the lookout for signs. What we are is we see that everybody else likes people, so we kind of do growing up, and we continue that on. Yeah. So Toni, I can't hear you. I'm not sure what's going on, but I'll just keep going. Right. Yeah. So it's really quite important that as parents or prospective parents, that we are aware that they are everywhere, and that they're going to be telling our children that people shouldn't touch them certain places. They're going to be using our language. They're going to be doing what we do because they want to build that trust. And we were having a conversation during the week, Toni, about how you did that very thing in the car. So you were sharing how...
Yes, I'm hoping you can hear me now.
Yes, we can. Yes, yeah.
So
it's good to share this with the people.
We absolutely. So I was brought up with a certain amount of stranger danger discussion, not in depth and not around language that made much sense to me. And I vowed that I would have better conversations with my children. However, we lived with a sexual predator, and I was about to marry a sexual predator. And unbeknownst to me, he still got to my daughter. And we had those conversations. And the conversation that Michelle makes reference to is the one where I had the kids in the car. They would have been 11 and 9 perhaps. And I had a talk about the right of their body to not allow people to touch it in a way that made them feel uncomfortable. And I thought that that was enough, but I'm telling you, it's not. And here's the discussion that Michelle and I had during the week. We need to have the language, and I'm going to hand back over to Michelle because she's an expert in talking about the language that we use to teach and educate our children.
Yeah. So we do need to tell children. I said to mine, you know, if mummy does something that makes you feel uncomfortable, you must tell me or daddy or granny or somebody, because you know whether or not you feel comfortable and okay inside. If you're not sure, that's something that you need to talk to someone about. It's not saying that I'm bad. It's helping you make sense of it. So
yeah,
if daddy does something, if someone else does something, it's not saying they're bad. It's saying that you're not okay or comfortable with it. Now, I remember we were living in Darwin, and I was basically a single mum because my husband worked away. And
yeah,
we talked about this too, Toni. Women who don't have a man around a lot are certainly someone that sexual predators, pedophiles prey on. Because of the secondary gains that we have, and I'll circle back to that in a moment, but I went to this doctor's surgery, and there was a doctor there. He was lovely. Everyone thought he was great. I went, I took my kids. He had lots of pictures up on the wall of children sitting on his knee, and he's got his arms wrapped around them, and, you know, they're laughing and he's laughing, and he had the little thing of lollies on the counter. And I remember him saying to my children, oh, come sit on my knee. And I said, no, they'll sit here on the chair because that's the appropriate thing to do. I keep trying to turn this down. Anyway, so he kept asking, and I kept saying no, and he kept offering them lollies, and I kept saying, no, we don't take lollies from people that aren't mum and dad. And I thanked him very nicely, but he kept it up, and he became more and more insistent. And so I said to him, and I said this in a very calm and polite way, I said, I can appreciate that, you know, you want the children to feel comfortable here in the surgery, you know, but what you're doing is behavior of someone who's pedophile. And my children do not sit on people's knees because it is not okay to sit on people's knees. They sit on the chair because that's safe. And I'm teaching my children to be safe. They do not take lollies from people. If I want them to have lollies, I will buy them inside the supermarket, and then we take them home and we have them. I said, my children do not take lollies out of containers. It doesn't matter who's offering them.
Yeah.
And he said no more. And I left, and I had been looking at this growing wall of pictures, and where he had hands on their legs, and, you know, just different things that I didn't like. So I rang the police and I said, okay, there may be nothing in this. However, I want you to be aware in case somebody else rings.
Yeah.
They can actually build a list of people. And I think this is one of the things that we really need to be aware of is what's the relationship that other people are trying to create with us and our children? And is it a relationship that is saying that this person is allowed to touch my child's legs? And you might think, oh, that's nothing. Well, actually it is. It is something.
Yes.
Because if you think it's okay for people to manage children in a certain way, when someone is doing things inappropriate, you will not see it.
Yeah.
Because you will block it out. So we have this way of processing information because we have so much coming towards us. It's a little bit of basic psych here. And for things that fall within our scope of conscious thinking, it goes into our unconscious. But where it's something that we haven't sort of got a plan, a strategy, or a way of thinking, or it's different to the way of thinking that we have, we delete it or distort it or generalize it. So the meaning is lost, right? So we actually do that on an unconscious level. We're not aware we're doing it. And so the meaning is lost. So this is really important to understand, because you need to think consciously and have a plan. On my website, I have plans about what to do. But I also advocate, have a plan about what is and isn't going to be an acceptable message that you're telling your children. Every time you see someone interact with your child and you don't respond, you're telling them it is okay for someone to do this to me. So think about that. And is that something that you think they should think anyone can do to them? Or do you need to say, Mum can do that, no one else? Or, you know what I mean?
Michelle, you're talking about things of quite a personal nature. So simple things like taking a child to the toilet, that should only be done by mum or dad in the first instance.
And I told my children, if I ever touch you in a way that makes you uncomfortable, you must tell someone, either gran or dad or me. So I never made it that they couldn't question what I did.
Yes.
Because if I do that, and I'll share a story with you that is really scary. If I do that, then I set them up to not communicate with someone that they think is safe. So we moved into a little place called Gladstone here in Queensland. And I ran a police check to see if there were any registered sex offenders. That's the best that I can do. And there were none in my area. So the neighbouring suburb, which was literally across the train station, train rails, you know. A week after we moved in and I'm driving to the supermarket, I hear on the radio this grandmother had been arrested for kidnapping her grandchildren after school and kidnapping them and locking them up so that her new partner could have access to them.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. So you see, if I'm saying it's all right for Gran to do something or someone else to do something, then I'm giving them the wrong message. If I'm saying, you know how you feel inside, if you don't feel comfortable inside about something, don't do it. And this is what you do. Give them options. Go and tell somebody. You know, so if someone's not acting properly, they're acting a bit strange, they don't sound right, don't do something because you've trusted them before. Reach out.
We talked about this in generic terms, but I think I want to just clarify for the audience that this is teaching your children about their instinct or their gut feeling, because it's always right.
Yes. That's exactly right.
Your
gut
feeling as a child absolutely will protect them, won't it, Michelle?
It will. It will go a long way. So there's our conscious mind, and then there's our unconscious mind, and then there's our intuition, that little voice.
Yes.
We call it our higher mind. And then we have our instinct. And our instinct and our intuition are not impaired by the unhelpful beliefs and decisions that we file away in our unconscious mind that drive our everyday conscious thinking, right? So your instinct is a way, it's consciously aware and picking up on things that your conscious mind is not processing. So if your children feel something, then it's important that they feel confident that they can act on it. Yes. The other thing is that it's got to be on their, how they feel, not on us and what we think. So I made it really clear to my kids all along, I'm not infallible. I might miss something you pick up on. You know what's right inside, right? But I also said about teaching them what sexual predators are. And when I didn't talk about sex, especially when they were toddlers, right? I didn't talk about
You don't need to, because they don't understand.
That's right. That there are people out there who have had difficulties and who do things that hurt other people. They get that. They understand that. That's simple. And if they do something to hurt you, you need to tell me so that I can help the sadness that you feel inside, and so that you can be happy. Because if you don't tell me, you'll just put it, like you bury it in the garden, you know, like dogs bury their bones, and then it will come later, and then it will really upset you, and that might make it worse when you get older. And we don't want that, do we? No. And they'll tell you no. So you want to be happy, you tell mummy what happens, and then mummy can explain it to you. And if it's a bad person, then mummy can help you with that too, right? Because you know, we may not be able to protect them, but we may then be able to step in to help them. Very important.
Or lessen the impact.
It lessens the impact, but also when we're doing this discussion, leaving aside all emotion. I just spoke about it like it was simple. Like, do you want spaghetti bolognese or lasagna for dinner? Keep it simple, because for them, it's got to, they're learning something new, and it needs to be simple, right? And if, you know, if people say, "Oh, anyone touch you, you just tell me and I'll have them," right? Whoa, what are you actually communicating in that? Well, first of all, it's all about you, and you better not get this wrong. If they touch you, I'm going to have them. You don't want dad or mum or someone to get in trouble. And that's a great, it's a great manipulative tool that they use. Is if you go and tell anyone, you'll get into trouble, and so will your parents, right? So it is a manipulative tool. You need to look at how you can give it to them simply and privately. So my children were never allowed to question me in public, right? If they came and they asked me, "Can I stay over at someone's house?" And I said, "Oh, today that doesn't suit, we'll think about it another time," they knew right from word go not to question, because I explained to them there might be things that I know that they don't know. And I don't want to say it out loud, but I want to keep them safe. And so I'll tell them when we get home. And I always told them and gave them something in a context that was age appropriate. That way they trusted my judgment. They knew that they would get learning from it, the understanding from it. And so if I said something, they knew, oh, okay, mum knows something, and this is about me being safe, right? And they didn't carry on because they knew. But I told them right from little, right? So that when they got to that age where they might pester, they knew not to, and they knew why. So it's a big responsibility that we have in raising our children. And
we certainly do.
We need to really step up to this one, because, you know, you've got to think about this. Do you want to find your daughter with a car wrapped around a tree, high as a kite? Do you want to find your son with a needle hanging out of his arm? You know, what is it that you want to prevent now for your child? Because those are just two examples of an outcome, right? sadly, there's a whole lot.
There is.
Yeah, there's a lot. And things that seem to be tame, that aren't. You know, some people cut themselves, other people go and get someone to do it for them. They you know what I mean? It might be that they go and get tattoos, or they'll go and find something where they can have pain inflicted upon them to try and, you know, there's a number of things
Get rid of the pain that they're feeling.
Yeah, deal with that and punish themselves, and you know, there's a whole range of psychology that goes with that, or psychology that goes with it, right? Which, so we want to actually be two things: the educator for our children, and if we're not a sexual predator, we want to be that person they come to, that they can reach out, so that we can actually give them the help that they might need. Yeah. Now, I mentioned last week about a couple that were on a site that I was on helping people, and their children had been assaulted by what I refer to in my book as the classic predator. The classic predator is someone that is a stranger. You do not know them, and this chap came in through the roof. And they just didn't know what to do. And they're like, oh, we hope that they will forget. And I'm like, you can never ask someone who's experienced this to forget. And I said it in my speech last week when I did my official launch. I tell you now, you leave your children absolutely mentally vulnerable in such a terrible way and a scary way that when it comes back, and it always comes back, I've never met anyone where it hasn't. Always. It comes back to get you when you're not expecting it. And if you don't know why or what it is, if you don't know where it's come from, and you're experiencing something that makes no sense to you, then you know what? That's horrific. And the fear that is associated with that, it's heart stopping. You hold your breath, you can't breathe, right? And then what do you do with that? So you're at work, you run into the toilet, you don't know why, you are suddenly feeling ill, the world is spinning, you're having an anxiety attack, you go to the doctor, he gives you some tablets, it still keeps happening, but hey, you know, I've got anxiety, so I'm taking the tablets, so it's okay now because someone's rubber stamped it. No, it's not actually, but also we don't want that. We want our children to have the resources and the resilience to be able to say, okay, I was assaulted, this happened, and this is probably where it's coming from. Oh, mum, it's happening again. I'm just going to, you know, reach out. I'm just going to reach out and find someone that can help me to sort of, you know, look at this little bit that's going on, right? So that it's not something that they don't know. And then the memories start to come back, you know, and it's like, you think, oh my God, he's bury it deeper. A lot of people just really bury it deeper. And when it comes back the next time, it's even worse. And they look at their life and they're like, oh, a lady who was 83 years of age came to sit in the audience when I spoke last week. And she met me afterwards, and she said to me that she'd been assaulted when she was a child. She's now 83 and financially well off. However, she said, I look back at my life and I see that event destroyed my life. The misery and the pain and the suffering and what I've missed out on in my life in terms of connections and relationships, she said, it destroyed my life, all from that one event. And I never realized it was happening. I didn't see it until I sat down recently and looked back and realized where it came from and what it's done and what that's meant for me and my family and everything. So, you know, please don't ever hope that your children will forget, because you're just setting them up.
Or get over it.
Well, you never get over it. So, you know, we might fall over and we might get a little graze on our knee, and we put a bit of Dettol and a Band-Aid and it heals. This is where I sometimes have a bit of an issue about the word healing.
Yeah.
Because we never heal. How can we
Yes.
heal? The only thing we can do is evolve. That's a healing process, and that it's an empowerment process. And that's why I use the language that I use when I'm speaking.
Yes.
I try to get people to understand that we can never, ever, you get a graze or a cut, you put your Band-Aid on, you never see it. It's not there anymore. No,
Yeah.
this will never be the case. You will always have a memory in your body, I do, of each and every assault that I before. And
Yes.
when you think about it, that's understandable given what's happened. So the best that you can do is evolve, is take that experience, make it work for you, make it work for your children, help them.
Yes.
Right? So, if you're not sort of being proactive, then the children are going to put up walls. They're going to resent you. You're not going to have this nice relationship with your children. And that's really sad too, because my walls are up so high, I couldn't even get through them for a long time. But I lost connection with my family. And that was really sad. I think about that and I think, well, that's sad that, that's what the cost was. So parents, if something's happened to your child, firstly, take a deep breath. Ask yourself, am I equipped to actually deal with this? And unless you've got a history and you've resolved it and you're like in a place where I'm at, or you've got extensive training, then I would say that you are not in a position to be able to help your child. And even myself, I actually got coaches for my children, specific ones, specific things. And a lot of people that are in sort of the social work area would get somebody else, because you've got to be mum and dad. And mum and dad's role in this is to have hugs, is to say, I love you, is to say that whatever has happened, babe, we're going to make it okay. Right?
Yeah.
You can come and talk to us anytime. Please, I beg you, do not ever say to them, it's all right, you'll forget about it soon. Or, oh, it's okay, look, you'll be all right. Please don't
It's
say
in the
that.
past. Leave it in the past. Those words are not helpful.
And it will never be in the past, because it's now, and it's now part of your life story. Depending on how those around you and you yourself as a child understand that part of your life story will determine how that life story moves forward.
Continues. Yeah.
Yes. So here's a story. This is a sad story. So grab a tissue. I was speaking with a friend, a fellow coach who works in a similar area, because I also work in domestic violence, which you find a lot of sexual assault in. And her friend, a lady she knows, daughter was assaulted. She's in her early teens, and she was starving herself, so anorexia, taking, bulimia, and just a whole range of different things, sneaking alcohol, all these sort of things that she was doing. And mum had had her to the psychologist and the psychiatrist, and they'd had her in the hospital, and then she's on these drugs, and it was continuing, and it was just like a revolving door. And my friend said, take her, I know someone who can actually really help your daughter, who's been through this at your daughter's age, and who can help, and gave her my number. And she didn't ever reach out. So my friend, another time when she caught up with her, said, oh, did you ever reach out to that lady? And she said, no, I can get treatment for free this way. So it's been on, I don't know how many, they'd been trying different pills for depression and anxiety to try and make all this behavior stop. It was months ago. She was back in hospital being force-fed. So, this is another thing. You've got to look at this and say, this mother probably really loves her daughter and doesn't realize that redrawing on her mortgage might save her daughter's life, but she would never think that because she's been raised to think that you just get over the problem and you shouldn't. We take our car into get service, right? We pay quite a lot of money to keep our car on the road, but we don't keep a lot of money to keep ourselves on the road, and it's our brain that drives us.
That's right.
Everything that we experience. So, really look at when you've got to make that decision as a parent, what is the outcome? And I spoke about this in my speech as well. If someone's making a referral, because we always usually end up at the GP, right? If someone's making a referral, ask them, what's the outcome going to be for that? What's that person going to offer? If someone steps up and they say, oh, okay, take these pills, see how that goes. Really? See how that goes? Well, no, I don't want to take your pills. If I'm going to take pills, I want to take pills that you can tell me what I can expect each and every day, each week, and when I will be off them and I'll be feeling better. If you ask them that, say that will never happen. And that's the truth. Right? But we need to be questioning. If we're going to our counsellor, and I know women that are exhausted, I know men that are exhausted from this, and it's just a constant regurgitation of their pain. I understand the concept around loosening the grip and helping people see something from a different perspective and expanding our map of the world. And that is very important. However, when you ask a child or someone that's an adult that was assaulted as a child, so you're asking that child, that person who is that child really, to expand their map of the world, and they've got no resources to do that, that's not a possibility for them. So we really have to really look at what are the options that I might like to go down. I mean, I'm one option, but you might find a different option. But always monitor before they start. Okay, so here's the difficulty. What's the plan? Have a structure, have a plan forward, have strategies. One of the biggest things that people who have been sexually assaulted need is a strategy that is not an abusive one, right?
Yes.
So we need a new strategy. And always, and I think I might have mentioned this last week, the strategy of think, act, observe the outcome. How do I feel about that? Okay, I'll tweak that response for next time. Is a process by which we can have more structured sort of outcomes, that because we're not coming from emotion. But when you're faced with a child who is very angry and who's hurting themselves and who is not speaking to you because you've said things like it'll get better and it hasn't, and you just need to move on, and let me assure you now, you cannot do this on willpower alone.
No, you need help, don't you, Michelle?
Yeah, I did that for years, and where did I end up? Because we're fighting our own selves.
Yes, we are fighting.
And we use that willpower scenario as a way of blaming ourselves for being a failure. And that's another cycle. So really think about it when you're sending a child off for some sort of therapy or something like that. I want to know the outcome. I want to know the history around this plan. I want to know, okay, so you've worked with how many children and how many of them? How long did it take before they didn't need you anymore?
Yeah.
Before they were part of your projected income on your income and balance sheet, right? We need to be holding our counsellors and everyone accountable.
Absolutely.
There's a point where we can get off. I got off.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
there's got to be a point where you can get off and you're
Yeah.
free, because now
And
you've
that
got
should be the purpose.
yeah,
That should be the purpose from the very beginning, is that you will no longer need therapy to cope. You may need top-ups from time to time, but you
time.
won't need that intensive level of counselling and therapy that you need right at the beginning.
Weekly for years or whatever. I will say here, though, I do know someone who is in the mental health profession herself, and so is her family. Very intelligent people. And she
Yeah.
was assaulted by dad. And she said to me, I
Mm.
could not live without my antidepressants. They get me through the day, right? So that might be the case. If someone does need their pill, but they may need something else as well. And so you've
Yeah.
really got to look at it, and you've really got to be able to say, okay, because there can be a lot of other things going on.
Yeah.
And so as a child, I began to compartmentalize bits of me. I was broken up
Yes.
into bits. My personality was
Yes.
fractured, right? And in
Yes.
the book, I talk about this test that I did where they thought maybe I had personality disorder for this job I was applying for. And I had to do this psych evaluation. So
Gosh,
I've never
yes.
lost time. However, I was different people depending on where I was, like a chameleon.
Oh, right.
And I began that as a child, right?
Okay.
And so I had this fractured personality. So there's a lot of things that can happen if we don't step up and actually look at being helpful in the right way. And if that child says, this is not helping, find something else. Don't just accept or go back to the same old, because you're setting yourself up for a lot of heartache, and them too.
Yeah.
Right. So coming back to this whole thing, I talk a lot in my book about identifying predators, seeing them,
Yes.
knowing what they look
Yes.
like. Right? Trust your children. If they don't feel comfortable around someone, then
Don't let them near them.
Don't go anywhere near them. Look at yourself and understand something. They will buy into your secondary and third gains. Secondary and third gains are things that we get that we find really difficult to let go of. So we might find ourselves in a situation that's not the best, but we may do because there's other things going on that we feel we must have to survive. So it's a real base level, thing often, especially for single mums, is an income provider, right?
Yeah.
Support, emotional support person. And these are things that we may, unawares to ourselves consciously, hold on to, and we may not be picking up on things that we should be seeing, different things that we should be thinking, hang on a minute.
That's
For
a bit.
example, if you're a single mum and you've got a partner and he's trying to bond with your child and have one-on-one time, no.
Yeah.
Can't tell you how many people I've spoken to, and a lady, it's the references in my book, Michelle Stevens. She was in this very situation. He took her for bonding time. He caged her over a weekend. He beat her. He did a number of things. He literally left her in a state of fear and confusion. He broke her down and built her back up that she would never speak up, and she never did.
Yeah.
And once she was past the golden age, he pimped her out to other pedophiles. And once she got past the age where pedophiles were interested, he pimped her out to men wanting to pay for sex. Oh, because they want it. I don't think she ever made a decision about that herself. So, we really,
Michelle, before we run out of time, the one thing that I wanted to discuss is this wording around grooming and what that looks like, because for these crimes to happen, the perpetrator often has to go through a process of grooming. So I'm wondering if you could just quickly tell the parents listening, when we talk about grooming, what do we mean?
Yeah. So I gave examples where this extended relative, people loved him. The children he assaulted loved him because he was always a
Mm,
very generous person, and he was very supportive, and he was always interactive, and he was always out there with the kids. He was always
yeah.
interested in listening to what they told him. He always remembered, and he would always say, "Oh, how did you go with that or the other thing?" He
Mm,
was always cheerful. This is the things that
yes.
people remember, right? They're
Mm,
going to groom you, parents. You're going to be
yes,
groomed.
they are. Mm,
Okay, so the wool is going to be, you're going to be groomed first. And that example that
yeah.
I just gave out with that other author, because first of all, they're going to give you something you want and need that they've figured
Yes.
out, and that you are then going to want to hold on to, so that then your
Mm,
guard is down, and then they begin the
yes.
relationship and the grooming with your children,
The child.
right? The child. So the handyman in my book, he bought my daughter that jewelry. Well, he
Yes.
bought her expensive jewelry. She didn't really care. There's a lot of girls who are
Mm,
14 years of age that would think that was very special, right?
yes.
And so it meant nothing to her, but it might have meant something to a different
Mm,
girl. And then that
yeah.
girl, that gift, and being told she's special. And in a world where our grades are looked at, we're bullied,
Yes.
everything's rush, 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 and there's no one to listen. Someone who takes the time to think that we're special is somebody
And
that we
listens.
appreciate, and that is a way in for them. So they're going to look for parents who are very busy, or
Yes.
own. They're going to look for these sort of vulnerabilities in us, the parents, and how they can
Yes.
step in and our win us over, win us on our vulnerabilities. So if
Yes.
anyone's
Yes.
being particularly supportive or nice or whatever, the minute we're feeling that we really value that, look at it and think again. What is it about that situation that I value or that's important to me? And is that safe for my child? It's
Yeah.
really hard because if you've not ever thought about it like that, um,
Yeah.
it can be quite confronting. But we are the gateway to our children. And then, of course, the teachers, the policemen, the ambulance drivers, they are the school chaplain, they are
Everyone.
school counselor. Go to the counsellor and talk to the counselor. No, we have to go too. We need to be going into school
Yeah.
and being seen. We need to be there all the time so that we're saying, hang on, our child is
Is
someone special.
important. Mm,
Yeah, and be getting to know I knew all of my children's teachers, whether they were women or men. And I
mm,
had dialogue with them regularly because
mm.
it was important that they knew that I was watching,
That,
not necessarily that
yeah.
they were going to assault my children,
We're
but
going to
that
do
I was
anything.
here for my children.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's important that you look
Michelle,
at.
yeah. Michelle, thank you. We are out of time again this week. Thank you for your expertise and explanation. For anyone who wants to ask Michelle any questions about any of this important topic about how to talk to your kids, grooming, how to protect your kids, please connect with Michelle. For those listening online, we've got the links to Michelle's sites. We've also got links to help for anyone who needs help around this subject. And in particular, can I just point out that Michelle does really specialised help in this area through her Angel Insight coaching. And just remember that you can do lots of things to protect your children. You can teach them lots of things, so a way that you can ensure that they have a safe and healthy life, rather, and don't succumb to some of the statistical things that happen to children that have been abused. We will be back next week with Michelle for another episode of Making Sense of Sexual Assault. Thank you very much for listening. Michelle, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll be back next week with Insight. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.